Today, we are going to take up the growth and development of W.B. Yeats as a poet. So let's begin. W.B. Yeats is one of the key figures of the 20th century literature. He was born in the middle of the 19th century and still today he is considered as a modern poet. When he was young, he believed in transcendentalism, but in his later years, he renounced it and became a politician and served as a senator of the Irish Free State. In 1923, it seems I have missed out the date. In 1923, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. As he had a long span of writing, one can see that his poems are different in the beginning as compared to the later one. There are changes in structure as well as in the form. In his poems, he used old verse, but in his later poems, his style was modernized or he became modernized. It was only It not only gained maturity but also acquired clarity and precision. His early poems were poetic, while later it became intense and accurate, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Yeats was a poet with vast knowledge and much ahead of his times. His style was unique and content of his lyric was different, and it grabbed the attention of the readers as well as the other poets. He was imitated by many poets of his time. To simplify the growth and development of Yeats, one can divide his poems into four phases of his writing style into two categories. To simplify the growth and development of Yeats, one can divide his poems into four phases and his writing style into two categories. His gradual evolution is one of the key factors of his poetry. He is a romantic in his early poetry, while realistic in theme and treatment in his later poems. He is naturally attracted to dreaminess, escapism, and mythology is predominant in his early poems. Let's talk about the four phases. The four phases are the Celtic Twilight phase, second is the transitional phase, third is the phase of maturity, and fourth is the last phase. The Celtic Twilight term has been taken up by the critics from Keats's prose romance, The Celtic Twilight, published in 1893. Yeats was attracted by the Georgian and pre-Raphaelite poets. He was always drawn towards mythology, magic, and mysteries. Time and again, he was engrossed in the mythology and fairy tales of Ireland. He compiled and edited many of the folk tales of Ireland. He even thought of writing an epic on one of the ancient Irish heroes' exploits. Some of his well-known works of this phase, they are the Juvenilia, The Wandering of Oisin and Other Poems, The Rose, The Wind Among the Reeds, Masada, that is a dramatic poem, The Countess Kathleen, The Shadowy Waters, The Celtic Twilight, John Sherman Andoya, Irish Fairy and Folk Tales. In the Celtic Twilight phase, Yeats was influenced by symbolism, expressionism, surrealism, imagism, impressionism, and Georgians, almost all movements of France and Germany that were prevalent in England and Ireland. The transitional phase. The early romanticism of Yeats remained with him till the end of 19th century. In 1898, Yeats tried to unite different nationalist political parties under one banner. But his nationalist sentiment received a great blow, and he was disgusted with the political parties and he turned his back to politics. The performance of the J.M. Singh's The Playboy of the Western World raised a huge hue and cry among Dubliners where it was being performed. They were upset by the way Singh had portrayed the Irish peasantry. Yeats was against the idea of commoners trampling down of art. This changed his outlook. From romantic and dreamy state, he had to face reality of the mobs. The changes that took place in his personality also changed him as a poet. And he started writing poems steeped in realism. This transition gave a new genre of poetry, that is, realistic poems. Some famous works are as follows: In the Seven Woods, The Green Hornet and the Other Poems, Responsibilities, The King's Threshold, that was produced in 1903, The Hourglass, A Morality, again produced in 1903, Ideas of Good and Evil, and Sing and the Ireland of his times. The phase of maturity. Yeats had up till now faced a variety of experiences, both bitter and sweet, and it had actually prepared him to face the hardships and realities of life head on. It was both frustrating and full of disillusionment as he had lost his love of his life, that is Morgan, who continuously declined his proposals and later married someone else. And his political aspirations were dashed to grounds. Not only this vision of life got complicated by his knowledge and experience of Eastern philosophy, Rosicrucianism, Platonism, and with the progress in the field of science and the world inching towards the First World War. He found himself looking for new themes and new techniques to express himself. For his poetic communication, his poems were simple, while the structure became even more simpler. The diction became colloquial, new images were introduced, and diverse elements were there in the poem. Although a disturbing phase for him, still he produced enormous amount of literary writing. Some famous works are as follows: The Wild Swan at Cooley, Michael Robertis and the Dancers, The Tower, The Winding Stair, At the Hawk's Well, The Player Queen, that was produced in 1919, The Full Moon in March, Reveries over Childhood and Youth, A Vision, and Dramatis Personae. Let's come to the last phase. This is the shortest phase beginning from 1936 to 1939. Although it is shortest, still his poetic communication did not decline. His poetic life was the longest, almost over 50 years in the history of English literature. Towards the last phase, he was drawn to the philosophy of the Upanishads to purge and liberate himself. and constantly he was self reflecting and remained active till the end of his life. His famous works of this time they are New Poems, Last Poems and Two Plays, 9 one act plays, If I Were 4 and 20, The 10 Principles of Upanishads. Yeats continually altered and refined his poetic craftsmanship. He believed in hard work and constantly challenged himself. He is known for his extraordinary writings. He will be remembered for his poetry and literary works, for his technique and style and presenting his meaningful ideas to the world. He will be remembered as a poet born ahead of his times, a poet with extensive knowledge. It is not easy to measure the greatness of Blueby Yeats as he was a poet par excellence. Thank you. Have a nice day.